Something is unfolding at this very moment within someone connected to you. Something intense. Something they can no longer push down or ignore. They have reached a place inside themselves they have never truly faced before. Not somewhere in the outer world, but deep within their own spirit. A choice is taking shape there, and it is far from ordinary. It is the kind of choice that reroots an entire life, the kind that cannot be undone once it is made, the kind that unsettles everything they once believed was certain. And at the center of that choice is you. Part of you may have sensed it even before these words found you, a subtle change in the energy between you, a quiet awareness that something in this bond had shifted, not damaged, not lost, just changed. Like the air before a storm breaks, like the pause before a truth is finally spoken, like the sacred hush that arrives before everything turns in a new direction. What you felt was not fantasy. It was not overthinking. It was real. It was a sign moving through the spiritual realm, preparing your heart for what is taking place right now. The universe has watched this person stand at this inner crossroads longer than you realize, and now the moment has arrived. Not later. Not at some far-off point in time. Right now. Divine timing led you to this message because a new chapter is ready to open. Subscribe and turn on all notifications. What you are hearing was never meant for everyone. It was meant for you. Your soul drew this message in, and the universe placed it before you at the exact moment your spirit was ready to receive it. The decision has already been made. They just have not said it out loud yet. That might sound impossible. You might be thinking, how can a decision be made if nothing has changed between you? But that is the thing about soul-level decisions. They do not happen in the world you can see. They happen deep beneath the surface, where the real movements take place. The decision has already been made. Their soul decided before their mind caught up. Their heart chose before their fear had a chance to argue. The deepest part of them already knows what they want, what they need, who they cannot live without. They are just afraid of what happens when they finally admit it. My dear, I need you to hear something before we go any further. Whatever happens with their decision does not decide who you are. Their answer does not write your story. Their timing does not set your clock. You were whole before this person ever looked at you, and you will be whole no matter what words come out of their mouth. But the universe wants you to know what is really happening right now. Because what they show on the outside and what is happening on the inside are not the same thing, not even close. If you already feel the weight of what I am saying, type "I feel this" in the comments. Let the universe know your soul is listening. Something started shifting inside this person weeks ago. It didn't begin with a single moment. It was more like water rising slowly, quietly, one feeling on top of another, until the weight of it became impossible to carry. They started to feel something they had been pushing down for a long time. Not just love, not just missing you, something deeper than both. A knowing. The kind of knowing that does not argue with logic. The kind that sits in the center of the chest and will not move. The kind that whispers the same thing every single morning and every single night, until the person has no choice but to listen. Something inside them already knows. They know that no one has ever made them feel the way you do. They know that the space you left behind cannot be filled by anything or anyone else. They know that every path they have tried to walk away from you has led them back to the same place. You. They tried to think their way out of it. They tried to reason with what they feel. They told themselves that if they waited long enough, the feeling would fade. That time would do what their willpower could not. That distance would erase what closeness created. But nothing faded. Nothing erased. The feeling did not get smaller. It got bigger. It filled every room they walked into. It sat beside them in silence. It followed them into sleep and was waiting for them when they woke up. A wise man once said that what you resist persists. That is exactly what is happening inside this person right now. The more they fight this feeling, the stronger it becomes. The more they try to ignore you, the louder your presence gets inside them. And now they are standing at the edge of a decision they can no longer avoid. This is not a decision about whether they love you. That was never the question. They know they love you. They have known it longer than they would admit. The decision is about what they are willing to do about it. Because loving someone in silence costs something, and they have been paying that cost for a long time. It costs them peace. It costs them sleep. It costs them the ability to be fully present anywhere, because part of them is always with you. The decision in front of them is not love or no love. It is truth or hiding. It is moving forward or staying frozen. It is choosing the life they actually want, or continuing to live the one they fell into. That is what makes this so heavy for them. This is not just about you. This is about who they are going to become. If you have ever felt someone's energy shift toward you, even without a word being spoken, type the first letter of their name in the comments. Let that letter carry the energy of this moment forward. The decision has already been made, but their fear has been trying to talk them out of it. Fear has a voice inside them that sounds very convincing. It says things like, "What if you get hurt again?" It says things like, "What if this does not work?" It says things like, "You are not ready." It says things like, "It is safer to stay where you are." It says things like, "They will be fine without you. Just give it more time." But fear is running out of things to say. Because every argument fear makes gets weaker when compared to how they feel when they think of you. Fear says, "Be careful." But their soul says, "This is the one." Fear says, "Wait." But their heart says, "I have waited too long already." Fear says, "What if it falls apart?" But something deeper says, "What if it is the most real thing I've ever known?" That deeper voice is winning. Not loudly, not all at once, but slowly and surely. The way truth always wins. The decision has already been made, even if they do not know it yet. They are not the same person they were a few months ago. Something changed in them. Not because of anything dramatic, not because of one big moment, but because the weight of holding back became heavier than the risk of letting go. They started to see themselves more clearly. The walls they built, the excuses they made, the moments they should have spoken but chose silence instead. They see it all now, and they cannot unsee it. Something inside them already knows, and that knowing is pushing them toward a moment they have been avoiding for a very long time. Take a slow breath right now. Let your shoulders fall. You have been holding tension you did not even know you were carrying. Not just about this person, about everything, about the waiting, about the wondering, about the not knowing. You do not have to hold that tonight. Just for these few minutes, let it go. You are safe here. The universe did not bring you this message to add to your weight. It brought you this message to take some of it away. Because here is what is true about you, my dear. While they have been making their decision, you have been making yours. And your decision was the harder one, because you decided to stop waiting for permission to live your own life. You decided that your peace matters. You decided that love is not supposed to feel like a test you keep failing. The decision has already been made on both sides. The difference is that you already made yours out loud. They are still whispering theirs in the dark. You have been quietly becoming someone new. Not loud, not dramatic, just steady. You stopped waiting for someone else's answer to feel okay. You stopped measuring your worth by how quickly someone chooses you. You stopped putting your life on pause for someone who had not yet learned to press play. And that shift inside you is part of what is pushing them toward their decision, because they can feel it. They can feel that you are no longer standing still. They can feel that the version of you who would wait forever is being replaced by a version who knows what they deserve. and that terrifies them. Not because they do not want that version of you, but because that version of you will not accept anything less than the truth. And they know it. You are not alone in this. I need you to hear that. Whatever you are feeling right now, the spiritual world is feeling it with you. Forces you cannot see have been working on this connection since before you knew it existed. Every invisible hand that has ever guided your life is guiding it now. The divine has not forgotten you. It has been moving every single piece into place, and the pieces are almost there. What is happening between you and this person is not random. It is sacred, and something bigger than both of you is making sure it reaches where it is supposed to go. The decision has already been made. And while you have been growing, this person has been going through something they do not know how to explain. Because I do not think you realize how much this is costing them. They carry the weight of it everywhere, not like a thought they can put down, like a pressure in their chest that never fully leaves. They go through their days doing ordinary things, but nothing feels ordinary anymore. Everything is filtered through this one question. They cannot stop asking themselves, what am I going to do about this person? They look at the life they built, and they see the cracks for the first time. Not because the life is bad, but because it is incomplete. And the piece that is missing has your shape. The universe made sure of that. They have been having conversations with themselves that no one else knows about. Long ones, honest ones. The kind where they finally stop performing and just sit with the truth. In those conversations, they admit things they have never said to anyone. They admit that no one else comes close to what they feel with you. They admit that they have been afraid, not of you, of what choosing you would mean, of what they would have to let go of what people might say, of the version of their life that would end so the real one could begin. They admit that the safest choice is not the right choice, and they admit that they have known this for longer than they want to believe. If you feel something shifting in the energy of this connection right now, type, "Something is shifting," in the comments. Your intuition is not wrong. It never was. Something inside them already knows. And that knowing has started to leak into everything they do. They say your name differently now, not out loud, inside themselves. They say it the way someone says a prayer they did not plan to pray. It just comes without permission, without planning, like breathing. They catch themselves thinking about you at moments that have nothing to do with you. And they used to be able to stop those thoughts. They used to be able to redirect, but the thoughts do not listen anymore. They come when they want. They stay as long as they need to, and they leave behind a warmth that takes hours to fade. This person is not deciding whether to love you. They decided that a long time ago. They are deciding whether to be brave enough to let that love change their life. And the divine has been waiting for this moment, because bravery does not arrive all at once. It builds layer by layer, like pressure beneath the earth, before something breaks through the surface. That pressure has been building inside them. Every day it grows, every night it deepens. Every time they close their eyes and see your face, it becomes harder to pretend that staying the same is an option. The breaking point is close. The moment when the cost of silence becomes greater than the cost of truth. The moment when pretending becomes more painful than being honest. The moment when they stop asking what if and start saying I have to. That moment is not far away. You can feel it. The way your body knows a storm is close before the first drop falls. Something in the air has changed between you and this person. Something invisible but undeniable. The decision has already been made. Now I want to share something this person would say to you if they had the courage to speak without fear. If they could sit across from you right now with no walls and no pretending and no worry about what comes next. These are the words that would come out. I keep telling myself I still have time, but I feel it slipping. Every day I do not speak. The distance grows, and I am the one creating it. I wanted to believe that what I feel would fade, that I could be strong enough to walk a different direction. But I am not strong enough. Not because I am weak, because what I feel for you is stronger than anything I have ever tried to fight. You did something to me that I did not give you permission to do. You reached a part of me I thought was sealed shut, and now I cannot close it again. I have tried. Believe me, I have tried. Every time I think I have found solid ground, your face appears, and the ground shifts. You are in my first thought and my last one, and every quiet moment between belongs to you, whether I wanted to or not. I know I have not earned the right to say this. I know my silence cost more than I understood. But the truth I have been avoiding is simple. My life does not work without you in it. Not the way I want it to. Not the way it is supposed to. I am scared. I am scared of what happens if I say this out loud. I'm scared of what I might lose. But I am more scared of spending the rest of my life knowing I had something real, and I let fear decide for me. I am done pretending my life works without you. It does not. That is what lives inside them right now. Those are not just words. That is the pressure that has been building behind every wall they ever put up. And the spiritual world has heard every single one of them. Something inside them already knows. It has always known. The walls were never strong enough to hold it back. They were only strong enough to slow it down. And now even that is ending. The decision has already been made, and the walls are losing. Carl Jung once said that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. This person is standing at the doorway of becoming who they truly are. And who they truly are is someone who loves you. Not quietly, not from a distance, not in secret, but fully and honestly and out loud. The decision has already been made. The only thing left is the moment they find the breath to say it. And still, through all of this, something remains true. Their decision does not own your future. Their timing does not control your peace. Whether they speak tomorrow, or next month, or next year, your life is not on hold. You are not a verdict waiting to be read. You are not a sentence waiting to be finished by someone else's voice. You are a whole person standing in your own light. And no one's decision can make that light brighter or dimmer. If they choose you, they are choosing someone who already chose themselves. If they do not, they are losing someone who already found their own way home. Either way, you win. Because the version of you standing here right now is not the version who needs someone else to feel complete. You already did that work. You already walked that road. You already sat in the silence long enough to hear your own voice and trust it. The decision has already been made, but it was not only made by them. It was made by the divine itself, by every quiet prayer you sent into the dark, by every night you loved someone without knowing if they loved you back, by every moment you chose to stay soft in a world that rewarded hardness. The spiritual world heard all of it, and it answered. All of that energy went somewhere, and where it went was here. To this moment, to this turning point, to this place where everything is about to shift. If you feel the truth of that in your body right now, type "I trust this" in the comments. Not for anyone else. For yourself. Let those words become part of your energy tonight. You were never wrong for caring about this person. You were never wrong for holding space for something you could not explain. You were never wrong for feeling what you felt, even when the world gave you no proof. But you were also never wrong for the moments when you stepped back. The moments when you chose your own peace over their confusion. The moments when you stopped pouring into something that wasn't pouring back. Those moments were not giving up. Those moments were your soul saying it is time to come home to yourself. And you listened. That is the bravest thing a heart can do, not holding on. Listening to the moment when it is time to hold yourself instead. The universe sees that. The divine sees that. Every force that has ever guided you sees that. And they are not asking you to go backward. They are asking you to keep standing exactly where you are. and let whatever is coming meet you there. Something is moving in the energy around this connection right now. You might feel it in the coming days. A warmth that appears when you're not expecting it. A knowing in your chest that something is about to shift. A feeling of calm that replaces the anxiety you have been carrying. A dream that feels more like a message than a memory. A moment where their energy touches yours so clearly that your whole body responds. These are not accidents. These are signals. The spiritual world is speaking directly to you. The universe is telling you that the decision forming inside this person is reaching its final shape. Divine timing is not slow, it is precise. And right now, it is moving faster than it has in a very long time. The old version of them, the one who hid, the one who stayed comfortable, the one who chose fear over truth, that version is dying. And what is being born in its place is someone who finally understands that the greatest risk is not loving you. The greatest risk is spending their life pretending they do not. This is their turning point. The moment the universe has been building toward since the first time your souls recognized each other. The decision has already been made. Something inside them already knows. And whatever comes next, you do not wait for it. You keep living. You keep growing. You keep becoming the person your soul came here to be. Because here is the deepest truth the universe wants you to carry out of this moment. You were never waiting for their decision. You were waiting for yourself to realize you do not need one. The love you have been looking for has been inside you this entire time. Not as a replacement for what they feel, but as the foundation that makes everything else possible. With or without their words, you are loved. With or without their choice, you are chosen. Not by them, by the divine. By the same force that built your soul and placed you here at this exact moment in time. Place your hand over your heart. Feel it beating. That rhythm has carried you through every hard night and every uncertain morning. It did not stop when they went quiet. It did not break when the waiting felt endless. It kept going for you, because of you. That is your signal. That steady beat is the universe telling you that you have always been enough. If you chose yourself and you're standing in that truth right now, type "I chose me" in the comments. Those 3 words are not just for the screen. They are for your spirit. The decision has already been made. And here is what I believe is coming. Not because I want to give you false hope, but because the energy around this connection is clear. Something is about to break open. The pressure that has been building inside this person has reached the place where silence becomes impossible. They will come to you, not with perfection, not with a rehearsed speech, not with everything figured out. They will come with something better than all of that. The truth, raw and shaking and imperfect. The kind of truth that only comes after someone has fought themselves long enough to stop fighting. Maybe it begins with a sentence they did not plan to say. Maybe it begins with a look that holds more than any word could carry. Maybe it begins with their voice breaking, because the thing they have been carrying is finally too heavy to hold alone. Maybe it begins with silence, the kind of silence that is not empty, but so full of everything they feel that the air between you becomes something you can almost touch. Whatever form it takes, you will know. Your body will know before your mind catches up, because your soul has been waiting for this signal. And when it arrives, every part of you will recognize it. But even then, my dear, you do not owe anyone a door you are not ready to open. You do not have to say yes just because someone finally found the courage to ask. You get to feel it. You get to sit with it. You get to decide from the version of you who has already learned what they are worth. Their decision does not rush your decision. Their truth does not overwrite your peace. You can hold love for someone and still hold your ground. You can feel everything and still choose wisely. You can want someone deeply and still ask them to prove that this time is different. That is not cold. That is sacred. That is someone who has learned that their peace is not for sale, not even for love. The decision has already been made, and something inside you already knows too. You know that whatever happens next, you will be okay. Not because you do not care, but because you finally care about yourself enough to trust whatever comes. The decision has already been made, and the proof will arrive not when you expect it, but when you're finally at peace enough to receive it. That is how the universe works. It does not deliver what you are chasing. It delivers what you are ready for. And you're ready now. You have been ready for longer than you know. If this message found you at the exact moment you needed it, type "signal received" in the comments. You do not have to shout it. Just let your spirit know that you hear what the universe is saying. You are not wrong for anything you felt. You did not make a mistake by loving deeply. You did not do anything wrong by staying open, by holding space, or by carrying that silence in your heart. Tonight, you are not invisible. You are felt. You are supported. You have never truly been alone, not even in the moments that felt the heaviest. Every quiet prayer you released into the dark was heard. Every tear that fell in private mattered. Every night you lay awake asking whether this bond was real had already been answered by something greater long before you ever formed the question. And that answer has always been yes. Send this to someone who is carrying this same ache tonight. Like this video so these words can find the people who need them most. Subscribe and turn on all notifications. And before you leave, listen to this final truth. The one standing at this turning point is nearer than ever to finally stepping forward. The choice has already been made within them. All that is left now is the strength to speak it, to reveal it, to stop holding it back. And that strength is rising day by day. Divine timing is moving it into place. Divine timing does not miss. You can already sense it. Even now, as these words reach you, something between you is vibrating softly beneath the surface. Something ancient, something unshaken. Something that survives the distance, the waiting, the uncertainty. So whatever comes next, keep walking. Not with fear, not with hesitation, but with the calm certainty that you have always been worthy of being chosen. You were never wrong. Not for your love, not for your hope, not for your heart. And the universe has never forgotten that. Until the next sign finds you, trust this. The universe is still with you, and it always will be.
If there's a life you think about in secret, a life you're afraid to want but can't stop imagining, leave a comment right now and just say, "I see it," because I want you to know that desire isn't random. It's trying to tell you something about who you actually are. And tonight, we're going to explore what it means to want something you've been too afraid to admit you want. You know exactly what I'm talking about, don't you? That life, that version of your life, that you think about when you're alone, when you're driving, when you're lying in bed before you fall asleep. The one you've never told anyone about, maybe haven't even fully admitted to yourself. The life where you're doing something completely different, living somewhere else, being someone else, or maybe just being more fully yourself than you've ever allowed yourself to be. It's there, isn't it? In the back of your mind, in those quiet moments when the noise of your actual life dies down and you're left with just yourself and your thoughts. And you feel it, that pull, that longing, that sense of what if I could have that? What if I could be that? What if my life looked like that instead of like this? But then almost immediately, before you can even fully form the thought, you shut it down. You tell yourself it's not realistic, it's not practical, it's selfish, it's irresponsible, it's too late, you're too old, you don't have the resources, you don't have the talent, you don't have the right, you don't deserve it. You tell yourself to be grateful for what you have, to stop wanting more, to stop being so dissatisfied, to accept your life as it is, instead of constantly wishing it were different. And so you push the desire down, You bury it. You pretend it's not there. You distract yourself with the million tasks and responsibilities of your actual life. But it doesn't go away, does it? It keeps coming back, in quiet moments, in dreams, in that ache you feel when you see someone else living a life that looks like the one you want. It keeps calling to you, keeps showing you images of what could be, keeps whispering, what if, what if, what if? And you're so tired of fighting it, so tired of suppressing it, so tired of telling yourself you can't have it, so tired of living with this constant low-level grief for the life you're not living. And tonight, as you lie here, I want you to know something important. That desire, that longing for a different life, it's not meaningless. It's not just fantasy. It's not proof that you're ungrateful or dissatisfied or broken. It's communication from your psyche, from your soul, from your true self, trying to tell you something about who you actually are and what you actually need. Carl Jung understood this deeply. He understood that the life you're afraid to want, the desires you suppress, the dreams you won't admit to having, they're not random. They're pointing to something real, something true, something about your authentic self that's trying to emerge. And when you suppress those desires, when you refuse to acknowledge them, when you tell yourself you can't have what you want, you're not just denying a preference or a wish, you're denying a part of yourself. And that part, it goes into the shadow. And from the shadow, it affects everything. Your energy, your aliveness, your sense of purpose, your capacity to be fully present in your actual life. Because part of you is always somewhere else, always thinking about the life you're not living, always grieving what could have been, always wondering what if. And tonight we're going to look at that. We're going to explore what it means to want something you've been too afraid to admit you want, to understand why you're afraid, to see what that desire is really about, and to consider, just consider, what might become possible if you gave yourself permission to actually want it, to actually pursue it, to actually create a life that looks more like what you secretly long for. So let's start here. Let's start with what that life looks like for you, because it's specific, isn't it? It's not just a vague sense of wanting something different. It's something particular, something you can see in your mind, something you've thought about enough that it has details, textures, feelings. Maybe it's a different career. Maybe you think about leaving the job that drains you and doing something that actually excites you, something creative or meaningful or aligned with your values. Maybe you can see yourself teaching or writing or making art or working with your hands or helping people in a way that feels real. Maybe you imagine what it would feel like to wake up and actually want to go to work, to feel energized by what you do instead of depleted by it, to use your gifts and your passion instead of just collecting a paycheck. Or maybe it's a different place. Maybe you think about living somewhere else, somewhere that feels more like home than wherever you are now. Maybe you imagine a small town where life moves slower, or a big city where there's energy and culture and possibility, or the mountains where you can breathe, or the ocean where you can hear the waves. Maybe you can see the house you'd live in, the view from your window, the garden you'd tend, the coffee shop you'd go to, the people you'd meet. Maybe you feel what it would be like to belong somewhere, to feel rooted, to feel like you're finally where you're supposed to be. Or maybe it's a different relationship structure. Maybe you're in a relationship that doesn't fit anymore, that you've outgrown, that was right for who you were, but isn't right for who you're becoming. And you think about what it would be like to be alone, to have space and freedom and quiet, to answer only to yourself, to make your own choices without having to accommodate someone else. Or maybe you're alone and you think about what it would be like to have a partner, a real partner, someone who sees you and gets you and loves you for who you actually are, not who you're performing to be. Or maybe you're in a traditional relationship and you think about something different, something unconventional, something that doesn't fit the script but feels more true to who you are. Or maybe it's about your lifestyle. Maybe you think about simplifying, getting rid of all the stuff and the commitments and the obligations and just living more simply, more intentionally, more aligned with what actually matters to you. Or maybe you think about expanding, taking up more space, having more, doing more, being more visible, more ambitious, more unapologetic about wanting what you want. Or maybe it's about your identity. Maybe the life you're afraid to want involves being someone different, expressing a part of yourself you've kept hidden. Maybe you think about dressing differently, looking different, being more feminine or more masculine or more androgynous or more flamboyant or more yourself in whatever way that means. Maybe you think about coming out in some way, about claiming an identity you've been denying, about letting people see a part of you that you've been hiding. Or maybe it's about your spirituality. Maybe you think about leaving the religion you were raised in or joining one that actually resonates, or exploring practices that feel alive to you, even though they're not what you're supposed to do. Maybe you imagine what it would feel like to connect with something greater in a way that's authentic to you, not prescribed by others. Or maybe it's about your creative expression. Maybe you think about writing that book, or making that art, or starting that project, or sharing your voice in some way. Maybe you imagine what it would be like to create something that matters to you, to put something of yourself into the world, to be seen and known through your work. Or maybe it's about your body. Maybe you think about treating your body differently, honoring it more, pushing it less, moving it in ways that feel good instead of punishing, feeding it what it wants instead of what you think you should eat, letting it be the size and shape it wants to be instead of constantly trying to make it smaller. Or maybe it's about your time. Maybe you think about having more of it, working less, producing less, achieving less, and just being more. Maybe you imagine long mornings with coffee and books, afternoons in nature, evenings with friends, time to rest and think and daydream and just exist without constantly doing. Or maybe it's a combination of all of these. Maybe the life you're afraid to want involves multiple changes, a complete reimagining of how you live, who you're with, what you do, where you are. Maybe you can see a version of your life that looks almost nothing like your current life, and that's both exciting and terrifying. Whatever it is for you, that life you think about, it's specific. You know what it looks like, what it feels like, what it would mean. And you've thought about it enough that it's not just a passing fantasy, it's something that keeps calling to you, keeps showing up, keeps asking to be acknowledged. And yet you're afraid of it, afraid to want it, afraid to admit you want it, afraid to pursue it. And that fear, that's what we need to look at. Because that fear is what's keeping you from even considering whether this life you long for might actually be possible. So, let's name the fears. Let's bring them into the light. Because when you name fear, it loses some of its power. When you see it clearly, you can evaluate whether it's based in truth or in old stories that might not be accurate anymore. Maybe you're afraid of failure, afraid that if you pursue this life you want and it doesn't work out, that will be proof that you were right to be afraid, that you shouldn't have wanted it, that you're not capable or deserving or talented enough, and so it feels safer to not try at all, to keep it as a fantasy rather than risk finding out it's not possible for you. Or maybe you're afraid of judgment, afraid of what people will think if you make these changes, if you leave the job or the relationship or the city or the religion or the identity that everyone expects you to maintain. Afraid of being seen as selfish or irresponsible or crazy or ungrateful or lost. Afraid of disappointing people, of losing their approval, of being criticized or rejected or misunderstood. Or maybe you're afraid of success, afraid that if you get what you want, you won't know how to handle it, or you'll lose it, or it won't make you happy, and then what? Afraid that having what you want will change you in ways you can't predict, will separate you from people you love, will bring responsibilities or visibility, or challenges you're not ready for. Or maybe you're afraid it's selfish, afraid that wanting this life means you're ungrateful for what you have, means you're not thinking about others, means you're prioritizing your own desires over your responsibilities to family or work or community. Afraid that good people don't want things for themselves, they sacrifice for others, and wanting what you want makes you bad or wrong or self-centered. Or maybe you're afraid it's too late. Afraid that you've already made your choices. You're too old, too established, too committed, too far down this path to change direction now. Afraid that this kind of transformation is for young people with fewer responsibilities and more options, not for you with your mortgage and your kids and your career and your life that's already built. Or maybe you're afraid you don't deserve it, afraid that people like you don't get to have lives like that you're not special enough or talented enough or worthy enough. Afraid that you'll try and be rejected, that the universe will say no, that you'll discover you were never meant for that life you want. Or maybe you're just afraid of the unknown. Afraid of leaving what's familiar even if it's not working. Afraid of the vulnerability of not knowing how things will turn out. Afraid of the discomfort of change and uncertainty and having to figure things out as you go. All of these fears, they're real, they're understandable. They make sense given your history and your conditioning and the messages you've received about what's possible and appropriate and deserving. But here's what I want you to consider as you rest here tonight. Those fears, they're not necessarily accurate predictions of what will actually happen if you pursue the life you want. They're often based on old stories, old beliefs, old experiences that may not be relevant to your current reality or your current self. And when you let those fears control your choices, when you let them keep you from even acknowledging what you want, you're not protecting yourself, you're limiting yourself. You're choosing known dissatisfaction over unknown possibility, and that's a heavy price to pay for safety. Carl Jung said that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But you can't become who you truly are if you're constantly suppressing the desires and longings that are trying to show you who that is. The life you're afraid to want, it's not just about external circumstances, it's about internal truth. It's about who you are underneath all the roles and responsibilities and expectations. And that truth, it deserves to be honored, it deserves to be seen, it deserves to be pursued, even if it's scary, even if it's risky, even if other people don't understand. Because the alternative is living your whole life with this ache, this longing, this sense of what could have been. And that's not sustainable. That's not healthy. That's not what you're here for. You're here to live your actual life, the one that's calling to you, not the one you think you're supposed to live. And tonight, as you rest, as you breathe, as you let yourself be here in this quiet darkness, I want you to give yourself permission, just for tonight, just in this space, to want what you want without immediately shutting it down. To let yourself imagine that life, to feel what it would feel like, to acknowledge, yes, this is what I want, this is what I long for, this is what would make me feel alive. You don't have to know how to get there. You don't have to make any decisions. You don't have to tell anyone. You just have to acknowledge it to yourself. Yes, I want this, and that's okay. That desire isn't wrong. It's not selfish. It's not foolish. It's you, trying to become more fully yourself, trying to live more authentically, trying to align your external life with your internal truth. And that's sacred work. That's important work. That's the work you're meant to be doing. Rest now. Breathe. Let your body soften. You've been carrying this secret longing for so long, holding it tight, keeping it hidden, afraid to let it out. And tonight, you're letting it be seen, at least by you, at least in this space. And that acknowledgement, that honoring of what you truly want, that's the beginning of everything changing. Not because you're going to wake up tomorrow and transform your entire life, but because you've stopped denying the truth of what you want. And that truth, once acknowledged, has power. It will guide you. It will show you next steps. It will help you make different choices, small ones at first, then bigger ones, until gradually your life starts to look more like the one you've been dreaming of. But it starts here. It starts with permission. It starts with acknowledgement. It starts with, yes, I want this, and that's okay. Rest. You're exactly where you need to be, doing exactly what you need to do. Trust the longing. Trust the desire. Trust that it's pointing you towards something real and true and yours. We have more to explore, but for now, just rest with the knowing that wanting what you want doesn't make you ungrateful or selfish or foolish. It makes you human. It makes you alive. It makes you someone who's willing to listen to the truth of who you are instead of living by someone else's script. And that's beautiful. That's courageous. That's exactly what you're supposed to be doing. Rest now. Breathe. Let the possibility settle in. The life you're afraid to want, it's not as impossible as you think, and you're not as stuck as you think, and wanting it doesn't make you wrong. It makes you honest. And that honesty, that's where everything begins. Now let's look at what Carl Jung really understood about the desires we deny, the lives we're afraid to want, the longings we suppress, because they don't fit the life we're supposed to be living. Because Jung spent his entire career studying what happens when people split off parts of themselves, when they reject their true nature in favor of what's acceptable, what's expected, what keeps them safe. And one of the things he understood most deeply was that the life you're afraid to want isn't random. It's not just fantasy. It's not meaningless, daydreaming. It's your psyche, your soul, your true self, trying to show you who you actually are underneath all the conditioning and expectations and roles you've taken on. Jung talked about something he called the unlived life, the life that wants to be lived but hasn't been, the potential that wants to actualize but has been suppressed. And he understood that carrying an unlived life, suppressing the desires and longings that point toward that life, it creates what he called a neurosis, a kind of psychological suffering that comes not from trauma or pathology, but from refusing to become who you actually are. When you're living a life that doesn't fit, when you're suppressing desires that point toward a truer expression of yourself, when you're afraid to want what you actually want, something in you suffers, not in a dramatic way necessarily, not in a way that makes you unable to function, but in a quiet, constant way. An ache, a restlessness, a sense that something's missing, a feeling of going through the motions without really being present, a low-level grief that colors everything. And you might try to address this suffering in other ways. You might try to be more grateful, more positive, more disciplined, more productive, more spiritual. You might try to fix yourself, to make yourself okay with the life you have, instead of constantly wanting something different. But Jung would say that's not the answer. The answer isn't making yourself okay with living a life that doesn't fit. The answer is acknowledging what actually fits and moving toward that, even if it's scary, even if it requires change, even if other people don't understand. Because the psyche, it has a trajectory, it has a direction it wants to move in, and that direction is always toward wholeness, toward integration, toward becoming more fully yourself. And when you suppress the desires and longings that are trying to point you in that direction, you're not just denying a preference, you're interfering with the psyche's natural movement toward health and wholeness. Think about it this way. The life you're afraid to want, the desires you keep secret, they're not external things you're supposed to acquire or achieve. They're internal truths, trying to become external realities. They're showing you something about who you are, what you value, what brings you alive, what feels authentic to you. When you long for a different career, it's not just about the job. It's about needing to use your gifts in a way that feels meaningful, needing to express a part of yourself that's not being expressed in your current work. When you long for a different place, it's not just about geography. It's about needing an environment that matches your internal landscape, needing to be somewhere that feels like home to your soul, not just your body. When you long for a different relationship, it's not just about the other person. It's about needing to be seen and known and loved for who you actually are, not who you're performing to be. When you long for a different lifestyle, it's not just about external circumstances. It's about needing to live in a way that's aligned with your actual values and rhythms and needs, not what you think you're supposed to value or need. All of these longings, they're pointing to something real, something true, something about your authentic self that's trying to emerge. And when you suppress them, when you tell yourself you can't have what you want, when you're afraid to even acknowledge what you desire, you're suppressing that authentic self. You're keeping yourself small and contained and acceptable when what you're meant to be is expansive and wild and fully yourself. Jung also understood that the desires we suppress don't just disappear. They go into what he called the shadow, that part of the psyche that holds everything we've rejected about ourselves. And from the shadow, these denied desires continue to affect us. They show up in our dreams, in our fantasies, in our projections onto others, in our envy and our resentment and our restlessness. You might find yourself feeling envious when you see someone else living the life you want, and you tell yourself that's petty or small or wrong. But Jung would say, no, that envy is information. It's showing you what you desire, what you're not allowing yourself to have. You might find yourself fantasizing obsessively about a different life, spending hours imagining what it would be like, and you tell yourself to stop daydreaming and focus on your actual life. But Jung would say those fantasies are important. They're showing you what your psyche is longing for. You might find yourself feeling resentful toward the life you have, toward the people in it, toward the responsibilities and obligations that keep you from pursuing what you actually want. And you tell yourself that's ungrateful or wrong. But Jung would say that resentment is a sign. It's telling you that something needs to change, that you're living out of alignment with your truth. All of these feelings, envy, fantasy, resentment, they're not problems to fix. They're communications from the shadow, from the part of you that holds the desires you've denied. And instead of judging these feelings or trying to make them go away, you need to listen to them, to understand what they're telling you about what you actually want and need. Jung would also say that the life you're afraid to want often represents what he called the unlived potential of the self. The self, in Jung's work, is the totality of who you are, conscious and unconscious, the fullest expression of your potential. And most of us, we live only a fraction of what we're capable of, only a small part of who we could be, because we're afraid, because we're conditioned, because we're trying to fit into roles and expectations that don't match our true nature. And the life you're afraid to want, it's showing you a version of yourself that's more aligned with that fuller potential, that's more expressive of who you actually are. When you imagine that different life, and you feel excited, alive, energized, that's not just fantasy. That's your psyche responding to a vision of yourself that's truer, that's more whole, that's more you. And when you suppress that vision, when you tell yourself it's not possible, or not practical, or not allowed, you're choosing to live as a fraction of yourself, instead of as your full self. And that choice, over time, it creates suffering. Now here's something important that Jung understood. He understood that pursuing the life you actually want, integrating the desires you've denied, it doesn't mean blowing up your entire life overnight. It doesn't mean being impulsive or irresponsible or abandoning all your commitments. It means starting to honor those desires, starting to take them seriously, starting to ask yourself what small steps you could take to move in that direction. Maybe you can't quit your job tomorrow and start a completely new career, but you could take a class, you could start a side project, you could begin exploring what that different work would actually entail. Maybe you can't move to a new place immediately, but you could visit, you could research, you could start making plans and saving money, and creating the conditions that would make it possible. Maybe you can't transform your relationship overnight, but you could start being more honest. You could start asking for what you need. You could start having conversations about what's not working and what needs to change. The point is not that you have to make dramatic changes right now. The point is that you have to stop denying what you want. You have to start acknowledging it, honoring it, taking it seriously, and then you have to start taking small steps, however small, in the direction of that life. Because here's what Jung discovered. When you start moving in the direction of your authentic desires, when you start aligning your life more with your true self, even in small ways, something shifts. You have more energy, more aliveness, more sense of purpose. You feel less resentful, less restless, less stuck. You start to feel like you're living your actual life instead of someone else's script. And that feeling, that sense of alignment, it's not selfish, it's not indulgent, it's what you're meant to experience. Jung believed that each person has what he called a vocation, a calling, not necessarily a job, but a sense of what they're meant to do and be in this life. And that calling, it's not something imposed from outside. It's something that emerges from within, from your deepest self, from your authentic nature. And the life you're afraid to want, it's often connected to that calling. It's showing you the direction you're meant to move in, the person you're meant to become. When you suppress that, when you refuse to listen to your calling because it doesn't fit what you're supposed to do, you're not just missing out on a different life. You're missing out on fulfilling your purpose, on becoming who you're meant to be, on offering to the world what only you can offer. And that's a loss, not just for you, but for everyone who would benefit from you being fully yourself. So as you rest here, as you breathe, I want you to consider what it would mean to take your desires seriously, to stop treating them as silly fantasies or selfish wishes, and instead, to see them as important information about who you are and what you need. What if the life you're afraid to want isn't something you're not supposed to have, but something you're meant to move toward? What if those desires aren't distractions from your real life, but invitations to a more authentic life? What if suppressing them isn't virtue, but self-abandonment? Jung would say that becoming who you truly are requires courage. It requires being willing to deviate from the script, to disappoint people, to face uncertainty, to risk failure. It requires choosing your own truth over other people's expectations, your own desires over what you think you're supposed to want, your own path over the well-worn road. And that's scary. That takes real bravery. But it's also the only way to live a life that feels fully yours. The only way to avoid spending your whole life wondering what if. The only way to become the person you're capable of being. And here's something else Jung understood. He understood that the second half of life, roughly after 40, it requires different things than the first half. The first half of life is often about establishing yourself, building a career, creating relationships, acquiring things, achieving goals, meeting expectations. And that's important, that's necessary. But the second half of life, Jung said, it's about something different. It's about meaning, depth, authenticity, becoming who you actually are instead of who you're supposed to be. And many people, when they reach midlife, they start feeling this pull towards something different. They start questioning the life they've built, wondering if this is all there is, feeling called towards something more authentic, even if they can't name what that is. And that's not a crisis. That's not something wrong with you. That's the psyche trying to redirect you toward the work of the second half of life, the work of becoming yourself. And if you're feeling that pull, if you're longing for a life that looks different from the one you have, it might be because you're being called to that second half work, to that deepening, to that move toward authenticity. And resisting that call, staying in the life that fit the first half even though it doesn't fit anymore, that creates that suffering, that restlessness, that sense that something's wrong. But listening to the call, starting to move toward what feels more authentic, that creates aliveness, purpose, a sense that you're finally living your actual life. So the question isn't whether the life you want is practical or realistic or appropriate. The question is whether it's true, whether it represents something authentic about who you are, whether it's pointing you toward your real self or away from it. And if it's pointing you toward your real self, toward a more authentic expression of who you are, then it deserves to be honored. It deserves to be pursued, even if it's scary, even if it's difficult, even if other people don't understand. Because Jung would say that the worst thing you can do is spend your whole life being someone you're not, living a life that doesn't fit, suppressing desires that are trying to show you who you actually are. That's not virtue. That's not selflessness. That's not being good. That's self-betrayal, and it leads to bitterness, resentment, regret, the sense at the end of your life that you never really lived. You just performed. You just went through the motions. You just did what you were supposed to do instead of what you were called to do. And you don't want that. You don't want to reach the end of your life and realize you never let yourself want what you wanted. Never let yourself pursue what you longed for. Never let yourself become who you were meant to be. You want to reach the end of your life and know that you lived authentically, that you honored your truth, that you became yourself, that you pursued what mattered to you even when it was hard, even when it was scary, even when other people didn't understand. And that starts now. That starts tonight. That starts with acknowledging what you actually want and giving yourself permission to take it seriously. Rest now. Breathe. Let this settle. You're not being selfish by wanting what you want. You're being honest. You're not being ungrateful by longing for something different. You're being authentic. You're not being foolish by dreaming of another life. You're listening to your soul. And that listening, that honoring of your true desires, that's sacred work. That's the work of becoming who you are. And it's the most important work you can do. Rest. We have more to explore. But for now, just rest with the knowing that your desires matter, your longings are valid, and the life you're afraid to want might be exactly the life you're meant to pursue. Trust that. Trust yourself. Trust that the psyche knows what it's doing when it shows you that vision of a different life. It's not tormenting you. It's guiding you. It's not making you dissatisfied. It's showing you what's possible. It's not leading you astray. It's leading you home, to yourself, to your truth, to the life that's actually yours. Rest now. Breathe. You're exactly where you need to be. Now let's talk about what your specific longing is trying to tell you. Because it's not just about the external circumstances of that life you imagine. It's about what those circumstances represent, what they would allow you to be, what part of yourself they would let you express that you're not expressing now. Because every desire, every longing, every dream of a different life, it's pointing to something deeper, something about your true nature, your authentic self, the person you are underneath all the roles and expectations and conditioning. And when you understand what your longing is really about, when you see what it's trying to show you, you can start to find ways to honor that truth, even if you can't transform your entire life overnight. So, let's look at some common longings and what they often reveal. If you long for a different career, if you think about leaving your current work and doing something completely different, what's that really about? On the surface, it might be about the job itself, about wanting to teach, or write, or make art, or work outdoors, or help people. But underneath, it's usually about needing to use parts of yourself that aren't being used in your current work. Maybe you're creative, but your job is purely analytical, and you're longing to express that creativity, to make something, to use your imagination in your work instead of just your logic. Maybe you're deeply relational, but your job is solitary, and you're longing for work that involves connection, collaboration, helping people face to face instead of working alone. Maybe you have strong values around justice or healing or sustainability, but your current work doesn't align with those values, and you're longing to do something that feels meaningful, that contributes to making things better, that uses your gifts in service of something you care about. Whatever it is, the longing for different work is usually telling you that important parts of yourself aren't being expressed, aren't being valued, aren't being used. And your psyche is trying to point you toward work that would honor more of who you actually are. If you long for a different place, if you think about leaving where you live and moving somewhere that feels more like home, what's that about? It might seem like it's just about geography, about preferring mountains to plains or ocean to desert, or small town to city. But usually it's deeper than that. It's about needing an environment that matches your internal landscape, that resonates with something essential in you. Maybe you're currently living somewhere fast-paced and busy, but your nature is slow and contemplative, and you're longing for a place where that slower pace is normal, where you don't feel like you're constantly behind, constantly trying to keep up, Maybe you're living somewhere isolated and quiet, but your nature is social and dynamic, and you're longing for a place with more energy, more culture, more opportunities for connection and stimulation. Maybe you're living somewhere that's practical but doesn't feed your soul, and you're longing for beauty, for nature, for a place that makes you feel alive just by being in it. The longing for a different place is usually telling you that your environment doesn't match who you are, that you need to be somewhere that feels aligned with your essential nature, instead of somewhere you just ended up. If you long for a different relationship structure, whether that's being alone when you're partnered or partnered when you're alone or something entirely different, what's that about? It's rarely just about the logistics of being with or without someone. It's usually about needing to be seen and known and loved in a way that you're not experiencing now. Maybe you're in a relationship where you feel invisible, where you're performing a role instead of being yourself, and you're longing for the freedom to just be, to not have to accommodate anyone else's needs or expectations, to answer only to yourself. Maybe you're alone and you're longing not just for companionship but for real intimacy, for someone who sees all of you and loves all of you, for the experience of being known instead of being lonely. Maybe you're in a traditional relationship structure that doesn't fit your nature, and you're longing for something more expansive, or more independent, or more fluid, something that honors who you actually are, instead of who you're supposed to be in a relationship. The longing for different relationships is usually telling you that you need to be more fully yourself in your intimate connections, that you need to be seen and valued for who you actually are, not for who you're performing to be. If you long for a simpler lifestyle, if you think about getting rid of all the stuff and the commitments and the complexity and just living more simply, what's that about? It's not really about minimalism or decluttering. It's usually about needing more space, more quiet, more room to breathe. Maybe your life has become so full, so busy, so demanding that there's no space left for you, for your thoughts, for your feelings, for just being instead of constantly doing. And you're longing for simplicity, not because you think you should want less, but because you genuinely need less external stimulation and more internal spaciousness. The longing for simplicity is usually telling you that you're overwhelmed, that you've taken on too much, that you need to create more space in your life for rest and reflection and just existing without constantly achieving. If you long for a more expansive lifestyle, if you think about having more, doing more, being more visible and ambitious and unapologetic, what's that about? It's not really about greed or ego. It's usually about needing to take up more space than you've been allowing yourself to take. Maybe you've spent your whole life making yourself small, being quiet, not asking for too much, staying in the background, and you're longing for permission to be bigger, to be seen, to take up space, to want things, and pursue them without apologizing. The longing for expansion is usually telling you that you've been suppressing your natural size, your natural power, your natural presence, and you need to let yourself be as big as you actually are. If you long to express yourself differently, whether through how you dress, or how you look, or how you present yourself to the world, what's that about? It's not really about fashion or appearance. It's usually about needing your outside to match your inside, needing to be seen as who you actually are, instead of who you're pretending to be. Maybe you've been dressing conservatively, professionally, appropriately, but it doesn't feel like you, and you're longing to dress in a way that expresses your personality, your creativity, your individuality. Maybe you've been presenting as one gender when you feel like another, or presenting as straight when you're not, or hiding some essential part of your identity to stay safe or acceptable. And you're longing for the freedom to be seen as yourself, to show the world who you actually are instead of who you think you're supposed to be. The longing for different self-expression is usually telling you that there's a gap between who you are inside and how you're showing up in the world, and you need to close that gap, to let your external presentation match your internal reality. If you long to create, if you think about writing, or making art, or building something, or sharing your voice in some way, what's that about? It's not really about being famous or successful, or even particularly skilled. It's usually about needing to externalize what's internal, to give form to what's inside you, to make something that didn't exist before you made it. Maybe you have thoughts and feelings and perspectives that need to be expressed, that feel bottled up inside you, and you're longing for a way to get them out, to share them, to make something of them. Maybe you have a story to tell, or beauty to create, or something to say that only you can say in the way you'd say it. The longing to create is usually telling you that you have something inside that needs to come out, that your internal world is rich and full and wants to be shared, and keeping it all inside is suffocating, is denying a fundamental part of who you are. If you long for more time, if you think about working less, or producing less, or having more spaciousness in your days, what's that about? It's not really about laziness or lack of ambition. It's usually about needing to live at a pace that matches your actual human rhythms, instead of the relentless pace that capitalism or culture demands. Maybe you're exhausted, depleted, running on empty, and you're longing for time to rest, to restore, to just be, without constantly producing or achieving. Maybe you have interests and relationships and practices that feed your soul, but you never have time for them, because all your time goes to work and obligations. And you're longing for a life that has room for what matters, not just what's urgent or required. The longing for more time is usually telling you that you're living at an unsustainable pace, that you're prioritizing productivity over presence, and you need to restructure your life to have more room for being human, instead of just doing and achieving. Do you see the pattern here? Every longing, every desire for a different life, it's not really about the external circumstances. It's about what those circumstances would allow you to be, and express, and experience. It's about parts of yourself that aren't being honored, needs that aren't being met, truths that aren't being lived. And when you understand that, when you see what your longing is really pointing to, you can start to find ways to honor that, even within your current life. Maybe you can't quit your job tomorrow, but you could start using your creativity in small ways, taking a class, doing a side project, finding ways to express that part of yourself, even if it's not your full-time work. Maybe you can't move to a different place right now, but you could bring elements of that place into your current environment, or visit regularly, or start making plans that would make a move possible in the future. Maybe you can't change your relationship structure overnight, but you could start being more honest, more yourself, creating more space for authenticity, even within the structure you're in. Maybe you can't simplify your whole life immediately, but you could start saying no to new commitments, could start decluttering, could start creating small pockets of space and quiet in your days. The point is not that you have to have the whole dream life right now. The point is that you have to start honoring what the dream is pointing to. You have to start making room for those parts of yourself, those needs, those truths, even in small ways. Because here's what happens when you do that. When you start honoring your authentic desires even in small ways, you start to feel more alive, more present, more yourself. The ache lessens, the restlessness calms, the sense of living someone else's life starts to fade. Not completely, not all at once, but gradually, bit by bit, as you bring more of your true self into your actual life. And sometimes, as you start honoring those desires in small ways, you discover that you need less dramatic change than you thought. Maybe you don't actually need to quit your job. Maybe you just need to find ways to use your creativity, or connect with people, or align with your values within the work you're doing. Maybe you don't actually need to move across the country. Maybe you just need to spend more time in nature or find community, or create beauty in your current space. Sometimes the longing for a completely different life is really a longing to be more fully yourself in the life you have. And when you start doing that, when you start expressing those suppressed parts of yourself, the desire for dramatic external change softens. But sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes as you start honoring your true desires, you realize that your current life really doesn't fit. that you really do need to make bigger changes, that the gap between who you are and how you're living is too wide to bridge with small adjustments. And that's important information too. That's your psyche telling you that transformation is necessary, that you can't keep living this way, that you need to pursue the life you're longing for, not just in small ways, but in real, substantial, life-changing ways. And if that's true, if your longing persists and grows even as you try to honor it in small ways, then you have a choice to make. You can keep living the life that doesn't fit, keep suppressing the desires that won't be quiet, keep performing a role that isn't you. Or you can start taking steps toward the life that would fit, toward expressing who you actually are, toward becoming the person you're meant to be. And that choice, it's not easy. It requires courage and risk and willingness to face uncertainty. But it's also the only way to avoid spending your whole life wondering what if, the only way to know that you lived authentically, that you honored your truth, that you became yourself. Carl Jung said that people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. And one of the ways we avoid facing our souls is by suppressing our deepest desires, by refusing to acknowledge what we really want, by staying in lives that don't fit because it's easier than pursuing what would actually align with our true nature. But you're not doing that anymore. You're here. You're listening. You're willing to look at what you've been afraid to want, and that means you're willing to face your soul, to see your truth, to acknowledge who you actually are, underneath all the conditioning and expectations. And that's profound work. That's brave work. That's the work of becoming whole. So as you rest here, as you breathe, I want you to ask yourself, what is my longing really about? What part of me is trying to emerge? What need is trying to be met? What truth is trying to be lived? And listen for the answer, not with your logical mind, but with your feeling, your intuition, your body. The answer might come as a word, a feeling, an image, a knowing. Just stay open to it. Stay curious. Trust that your psyche will show you what you need to see. And whatever comes, whatever you realize your longing is really about, honor it. Don't judge it. Don't dismiss it. Don't tell yourself it's not important or not possible. Just acknowledge it. Yes, this is what I need. This is who I am. This is what's trying to emerge. And then ask yourself, even if I can't have the whole dream life right now, how can I start honoring this truth, this need, this part of myself, in small ways, in my current life? What's one thing I could do? One choice I could make? One way I could express this part of myself that I've been suppressing? And commit to doing that, to taking that one small step toward alignment, toward authenticity, toward becoming more fully yourself. Because that's how transformation happens, not through dramatic overnight change, but through small, consistent choices to honor your truth, to express your authentic self, to move toward the life that actually fits instead of staying in the one that doesn't. Rest now. Breathe. You're doing beautiful work just by being willing to look at this, to acknowledge what you really want, to see what it's telling you about who you are. You don't have to have it all figured out. You don't have to know exactly how to get to that dream life. You just have to keep listening to your longing, keep honoring your truth, keep taking small steps toward alignment. And over time, those small steps will add up to a life that looks and feels more like the one you've been dreaming of. A life where you're more fully yourself, where your desires are honored, where your truth is lived. That's what you're moving toward. That's what this work is about. Trust the longing. Trust yourself. Trust that your psyche knows what it's doing when it shows you that vision of a different life. It's guiding you home to yourself, and you're following, and that's exactly what you're supposed to be doing. Rest. We have more to explore, but for now, just rest with the knowing that your longing is wise, your desires are valid, and the life you're afraid to want is trying to show you who you really are. Listen to that, honor that, move toward that. You're exactly where you need to be. Now let's talk about permission, because this is where so many people get stuck. This is where the transformation stops, before it even begins. You can understand what you want. You can see what it's telling you about who you are. You can even know intellectually that it's okay to want what you want. But until you give yourself actual permission, deep internal permission, to want it and to pursue it, nothing changes. You stay stuck in the same pattern of longing and suppressing, dreaming and denying, imagining, and then telling yourself no. So let's look at what it actually means to give yourself permission, and why it's so hard, and how to do it, even when it feels impossible. First, understand that permission isn't something someone else can give you. You might want your partner to tell you it's okay to want what you want, or your parents to approve, or your friends to understand, or society to validate your choices. And yes, it helps when the people around you support you, when they give you their blessing, when they tell you, go for it, we're behind you. But ultimately, the permission that matters has to come from you. You have to be willing to say, yes, I want this, and I'm allowed to want this, and I'm going to pursue this, even if other people don't understand, even if they don't approve, even if they think I'm making a mistake. Because here's the truth. There will always be people who don't understand, who think you're being selfish, or impractical, or foolish. There will always be voices telling you to stay where you are, to be grateful for what you have, to stop wanting more. And if you're waiting for everyone around you to give you permission before you pursue what you actually want, you'll wait forever. External permission is a luxury. Internal permission is a necessity. So how do you give yourself permission when you've spent your whole life being told what you're allowed to want and what you're not? How do you override years or decades of conditioning that taught you to suppress your desires, to prioritize everyone else's needs, to stay small and quiet and acceptable? It starts with recognizing that the voice telling you no, you can't have that, you shouldn't want that, that's not for you, that voice isn't necessarily truth, it's conditioning. It's all the messages you internalized from parents, teachers, culture, religion, about what's acceptable and appropriate and allowed for someone like you. And those messages, they might have served a purpose at one time. They might have kept you safe or helped you fit in or protected you from judgment or rejection. But they're not serving you anymore. They're limiting you. They're keeping you from becoming who you're meant to be. So start questioning those messages. Start asking yourself, is this actually true, or is this just what I was taught? Do I actually believe this, or am I just repeating what I heard? Is this my voice, or is this someone else's voice that I've internalized? When you hear yourself thinking, I can't want that, or I shouldn't pursue that, or that's not for people like me, pause and ask yourself, who says? Who decided that? And is that actually true? Or is it just a belief I absorbed? Most of the time you'll realize it's not truth. It's just conditioning. And conditioning can be questioned, can be challenged, can be changed. Second, giving yourself permission means being willing to prioritize your own needs and desires. And that's hard for a lot of people, especially women, especially people who've been taught that selflessness is virtue and self-care is selfish. You've been taught to put everyone else first, to sacrifice your own wants for others, to derive your worth from how much you give and how little you need. And so the idea of prioritizing what you want, of saying my desires matter, my needs are important, I'm going to pursue what I want even if it inconveniences others, that feels selfish, that feels wrong, that feels like you're being a bad person. But here's what you need to understand. Prioritizing yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary. You can't live a full, authentic life if you're constantly suppressing what you want in favor of what everyone else wants. You can't become who you're meant to be if you're always making yourself smaller so others can be bigger. You can't pursue your calling if you're spending all your energy meeting everyone else's needs. And actually, when you suppress yourself, when you live inauthentically, when you ignore your own desires to please others, you're not being selfless, you're being self-abandoning. And that self-abandonment, it doesn't just hurt you, it hurts the people around you too, because they're not getting the real you. They're getting a resentful, depleted version of you, who's secretly angry about all the sacrificing but won't admit it. So prioritizing yourself, honoring your desires, pursuing what you actually want, that's not selfish. That's self-respect. That's recognizing that your needs matter as much as anyone else's, that your life is as valuable as anyone else's, that you deserve to live authentically just as much as anyone else does. And yes, that might mean disappointing people sometimes. It might mean saying no when you used to say yes. It might mean choosing yourself over others in ways you've never allowed yourself to do before. But that's not wrong. That's healthy. That's necessary. That's what people who live authentic lives do. Third, giving yourself permission means being willing to fail, to try something and have it not work out, to risk disappointment and embarrassment, and having to admit that maybe this wasn't the right path after all. And that's terrifying for a lot of people. That risk of failure is what keeps them from ever trying, from ever pursuing what they want. Better to keep it as a fantasy, as a someday dream, than to actually try and find out it doesn't work. But here's what you need to understand. Failure isn't the worst thing that can happen. The worst thing that can happen is spending your whole life wondering what if, never knowing if you could have done it, never finding out if that life you wanted was actually possible for you. Failure is temporary. Regret is permanent. If you try something and it doesn't work, you learn something. You adjust. You try something else. But if you never try, you never know. And you spend your whole life carrying that wondering, that ache of unlived potential. And actually, what looks like failure often isn't. It's often redirection. It's the universe, or your psyche, showing you that this particular path isn't quite right. But here's what you learned. Here's what you discovered about yourself. Here's the next thing to try. So many people's success stories involve multiple failures, multiple attempts, multiple redirections before they found the thing that worked. But they only got there because they were willing to try, to fail, to try again. If they had let the fear of failure stop them from ever starting, they never would have found their way. So give yourself permission to fail, to be imperfect, to try things that might not work out. That's not weakness, that's courage. That's how you learn, that's how you grow, that's how you eventually find what does work. Fourth, giving yourself permission means being willing to change, to let go of who you've been, to become someone new. And that's unsettling because you know who you are now. You know how to be this person, even if this person isn't fully you. But if you pursue what you actually want, if you start living more authentically, you'll change. You'll become someone different, someone more aligned with your true nature, but also someone unfamiliar. And there's grief in that. Grief for the person you've been, the identity you've held, the life you've known even if it wasn't fully yours. And there's fear in that. Fear of becoming someone you don't recognize, someone the people in your life don't recognize, someone who doesn't fit the old roles and relationships and expectations. But here's what Carl Jung understood. Becoming who you truly are requires letting go of who you've been, requires allowing yourself to change and evolve and transform. The caterpillar has to dissolve in the cocoon before it can become the butterfly. There's no way to become without first letting go of what was. And yes, that's uncomfortable. Yes, that's uncertain. Yes, that requires trust that something good is on the other side of the dissolution. But it's also the only way to live, the only way to grow, the only way to become more fully yourself. So give yourself permission to change, to evolve, to become someone new. You're not betraying who you've been. You're honoring who you're becoming. Fifth, giving yourself permission means being willing to be judged, to be misunderstood, to have people think you're making a mistake, or being selfish, or going through a crisis. Because when you start pursuing what you actually want, when you start living more authentically, some people won't understand, some people won't approve, Some people will have opinions about what you should be doing instead. And you have to be willing to let them have their opinions, to let them judge, to let them think what they think, without letting that stop you. This doesn't mean you don't care about anyone's opinion. It doesn't mean you're totally indifferent to what people think. It means you care more about living authentically than about being approved of. You care more about becoming yourself than about maintaining an image. You care more about honoring your truth than about keeping everyone comfortable. And that's a shift. That's a choice you have to keep making over and over. To choose your own truth over other people's comfort. To choose your own path over other people's expectations. To choose yourself even when it means disappointing others. Now here's something important to understand about permission. You don't have to feel ready to give yourself permission. You don't have to wait until you're confident, until you're certain, until you're sure this is the right choice. You can give yourself permission while still being scared, while still doubting, while still not knowing if this will work out. Permission isn't about certainty, it's about willingness. It's saying, I don't know if this will work, but I'm willing to try. I don't know if I can do this, but I'm willing to find out. I don't know if this is the right choice, but I'm willing to pursue it and see. That's all you need. That willingness, that yes, even in the midst of fear and doubt and uncertainty. So if you're waiting to feel ready before you give yourself permission to want what you want, before you start pursuing it, you might wait forever. Readiness doesn't come before action. It comes through action. You become ready by doing, by trying, by taking small steps even when you're scared. And each step you take, each small choice you make toward what you actually want, it builds your confidence. It shows you that you can do this. It creates momentum. But you have to start. You have to give yourself permission to start even when you don't feel ready. And then the readiness develops as you go. Let me give you some practical ways to start giving yourself permission. First, say it out loud, even if you're alone, even if it's just a whisper. Say, I give myself permission to want this. I give myself permission to pursue this. I'm allowed to want what I want. Saying it out loud makes it real, makes it concrete, makes it something you've claimed instead of just something you've thought. Second, write it down. Write about what you want, why you want it, what it would mean to pursue it. Write yourself a permission slip, literally, like you're writing permission for yourself to do this thing you've been afraid to do. Writing it makes it visible, makes it something you can return to when doubt creeps in, when the old voices start telling you, no, you can't. Third, take one small action, something that moves you even slightly in the direction of what you want. Not a huge, dramatic action, just something small, something that says, I'm taking this seriously, I'm honoring this desire. Maybe you research a class you'd like to take. Maybe you visit a place you've been thinking about moving to. Maybe you have one honest conversation about something you've been hiding. Just one small action that demonstrates to yourself that you're giving yourself permission to pursue this. Fourth, find people who support you, who understand, who encourage you to pursue what you actually want instead of what you're supposed to want. This might be friends, a therapist, an online community, whoever can reflect back to you that your desires are valid, that your dreams are worth pursuing, that you're not crazy for wanting what you want. External permission isn't necessary, but external support is helpful. It makes the journey less lonely. It gives you people to turn to when you're doubting yourself. Fifth, practice self-compassion. Because giving yourself permission to want what you want and pursue it, it's going to bring up a lot of feelings, a lot of fear and doubt and guilt and uncertainty. And you need to be kind to yourself through that. You need to treat yourself with the same compassion you'd offer a friend who was being brave and trying something scary. Talk to yourself gently. Remind yourself that it's okay to be afraid, that it's okay to not know how things will turn out, that you're doing the best you can, and that's enough. As you rest here, as you breathe, I want you to practice giving yourself permission right now, in this moment. Think about the life you've been afraid to want, that vision that keeps coming back to you. And instead of immediately shutting it down, instead of listing all the reasons why you can't have it, try saying to yourself, just as an experiment, I give myself permission to want this. Say it in your mind. Say it with your whole heart. I give myself permission to want this, to pursue this, to move toward this, even if I'm scared, even if I don't know how, even if other people don't understand. I give myself permission. And notice what happens in your body when you say that. Notice if there's a softening, a relief, a sense of yes, finally. That's your true self responding. That's the part of you that's been waiting for this permission, that's been longing to be acknowledged and honored and pursued. And notice also if there's resistance, if there's a voice that says, no, you can't. No, that's not allowed. No, you don't deserve this. That's the conditioning. That's the old messages. That's the fear. And you can acknowledge that fear. You can thank it for trying to protect you. And you can still give yourself permission anyway. You can say, I hear you, fear. I understand you're trying to keep me safe, and I'm going to move forward anyway. I'm going to give myself permission anyway. I'm going to pursue what I actually want anyway. That's the practice. That's how you start to shift from suppression to permission, from denial to acknowledgement, from living someone else's life to living your own. And it's not a one-time thing. It's something you'll have to keep doing, keep choosing, keep practicing. Every time the old voices come back, every time the fear rises, every time you're tempted to shut down your desires and go back to the safe, familiar pattern of suppression, you'll have to give yourself permission again. You'll have to choose again. You'll have to say again, I'm allowed to want this. I'm allowed to pursue this. I'm allowed to become who I'm meant to be. But it gets easier. The more you practice it, the more you choose it, the more natural it becomes to honor your desires instead of suppress them, to give yourself permission instead of waiting for it from others, to pursue what you actually want instead of what you think you should want. Rest now. Breathe. You've done important work tonight. You've looked at what you want. You've understood what it's telling you. And you've started to give yourself permission to actually pursue it. That's profound. That's brave. That's the beginning of everything changing. You don't have to have it all figured out. You don't have to know exactly how you're going to get from here to there. You just have to keep giving yourself permission. Keep taking small steps. Keep honoring your truth. And over time, those permissions and those steps will add up to a life that looks more like what you actually want, a life where you're more fully yourself, where your desires are honored, where your truth is lived. That's what you're moving toward. Trust it. Trust yourself. Trust that giving yourself permission is not selfish or foolish. It's the most important thing you can do. Rest. We're almost there. Just a little more to explore, and then you can drift into deep sleep, carrying all of this with you, letting it integrate, letting it change you from the inside out. You're exactly where you need to be. Now let's talk about what it actually looks like to start moving toward the life you want, because permission is essential, but it's just the beginning. It's just opening the door. Actually walking through that door, actually taking steps toward what you want, that's where the real transformation happens. That's where your life starts to change, from the one you're living to the one you're longing for. And I want to be clear about something. This doesn't have to be dramatic. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. You don't have to quit your job tomorrow, or leave your relationship, or move across the country next week. That kind of dramatic sudden change, it can work for some people in some situations, but for most people, most of the time, transformation happens gradually, through small, consistent choices, through incremental shifts, through what looks like nothing much from the outside, but feels like everything on the inside. So let's talk about how to start, how to take those first small steps when you're scared and uncertain and don't really know what you're doing. First, get clear on what you're actually moving toward. Not the whole vision necessarily, not every detail of that dream life, but the essence, the core, what matters most. Because if your vision is too vague or too complex, you won't know where to start. But if you can identify the essence, the thing that would make the biggest difference, the element that feels most essential, then you have somewhere to begin. Maybe the essence is freedom. Maybe what you really want, underneath all the specifics, is more freedom to make your own choices, to live on your own terms, to answer to yourself, instead of constantly accommodating others. Or maybe the essence is creativity. Maybe what you really want is to express yourself creatively, to make things, to use your imagination in your daily life, instead of just in your spare moments. Or maybe the essence is connection. Maybe what you really want is deeper, more authentic relationships, where you can be fully yourself, where you're seen and known and valued for who you actually are. Or maybe the essence is meaning. Maybe what you really want is to do work that matters, to contribute something, to use your life in service of something bigger than yourself. Or maybe the essence is peace. Maybe what you really want is less chaos and overwhelm and constant doing, more quiet and spaciousness and room to breathe. Whatever it is for you, name it. Identify the essence of what you're longing for, because that essence can guide you even when you don't know the exact form it should take, even when the full vision seems impossible. Second, identify what's one small thing you could do today or this week that would move you even slightly toward that essence. Not a big thing, not a life-changing decision, just something small, something manageable, something that says, I'm taking this seriously, I'm honoring this desire. If the essence is freedom, maybe you say no to one commitment you don't actually want to do. If the essence is creativity, maybe you spend 30 minutes making something just for yourself. If the essence is connection, maybe you have one honest conversation with someone you care about. If the essence is meaning, maybe you volunteer for an hour or research organizations doing work you care about. If the essence is peace, maybe you protect 30 minutes of your day for quiet, for rest, for doing absolutely nothing. Just one small thing, something that honors the essence of what you want, something that moves you even incrementally toward it. And then do it, actually do it, not just think about it or plan to do it, but actually follow through. Because action, even small action, it creates momentum. It shows you that change is possible. It demonstrates to yourself that you're serious about this, that you're not just dreaming, you're actually moving. Third, notice how it feels when you take that small action. Do you feel more alive, more yourself, more aligned? Do you feel relief? Like, yes, this is right. This is what I've been needing. Pay attention to that feeling. Let it encourage you. Let it show you that you're moving in the right direction. And also notice if it brings up fear or guilt or resistance, because it probably will. When you start honoring your desires, when you start moving toward what you actually want, the old patterns push back, the conditioning kicks in. The voices tell you you're being selfish or irresponsible or foolish. That's normal, that's expected. That doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. It means you're doing something new, something that threatens the old, comfortable, familiar patterns. So notice the resistance, acknowledge it, thank it for trying to protect you, and keep going anyway. Fourth, do it again. Take another small action, and another, not all at once, not in a frantic rush to transform everything immediately, but consistently, regularly. Making small choices that honor what you want, that move you toward the essence of that life you're longing for. Maybe it's once a day, maybe it's once a week, whatever feels sustainable for you. The point is consistency. The point is building a pattern of choosing what you actually want instead of what you think you should want, of honoring your truth instead of suppressing it, of moving toward alignment instead of staying stuck in the life that doesn't fit. And over time, these small actions accumulate. They build on each other. They create momentum. You start to feel more confident, more capable, more certain that this is possible, that you can actually do this. You start to see that the life you want isn't as far away as you thought, that you're already living parts of it, that you're already becoming the person you want to be. And sometimes, as you take these small steps, opportunities start to appear that weren't visible before. Doors open, people show up, circumstances shift in ways you couldn't have predicted or planned. Not because the universe is magically giving you what you want, but because you're paying attention differently. You're open to possibilities you would have dismissed before. You're willing to take risks you wouldn't have taken when you were still suppressing your desires. Fifth, be willing to adjust, to course correct, to change direction if what you're doing isn't working or isn't feeling right. Because the vision you have now, the life you think you want, it might not be exactly accurate. It might be pointing in the right direction, but the specifics might need to shift as you learn more about yourself, as you try things and see what actually fits. And that's okay. That's part of the process. You're not locked into your initial vision. You're allowed to change your mind, to realize that actually this isn't quite what I thought it would be. Let me try this other thing instead. Flexibility is important. Willingness to experiment and learn and adjust is important. You're not failing if the path curves. You're learning, you're discovering, you're finding your way. Now let's talk about what happens in your relationships as you start pursuing what you actually want, because this is where a lot of people get stuck. This is where the fear becomes most intense. You're afraid that if you start living more authentically, if you start pursuing your own desires, if you start changing, the people in your life won't understand, won't support you, won't stay. And that's a real fear. It has some basis in reality. Some people might pull away when you change. Some people might not understand. Some people might prefer the version of you that was smaller and easier and more accommodating. But here's what you need to know. The people who truly love you, who truly see you, who truly want what's best for you, they'll adjust, they'll support you even if they don't fully understand. They'll choose relationship with the real you over comfort with the performing you. And yes, there might be some difficult conversations. Yes, there might be some adjustments. Yes, they might need time to get used to this new version of you that's more authentic and more herself. But if the relationship is real, if there's genuine love and connection underneath the roles and patterns, it can survive you changing. It can actually become stronger and deeper when you're being more real. The relationships you might lose are the ones that were based on you being a certain way, on you meeting certain needs, on you playing a certain role. And losing those relationships hurts. Absolutely. It's grief, it's loss, even when you know it's necessary. But what you gain is the possibility of real relationship where you don't have to perform, where you can be fully yourself, where you're loved for who you actually are, not who you're pretending to be. And that's worth it. That's worth the risk. That's worth the temporary pain of losing connections that weren't real anyway. So as you start pursuing what you want, be honest with the people in your life. Let them know you're changing, you're evolving, you're becoming more yourself. Give them the chance to come with you, to support you, to adjust. Some will, some won't. Let the ones who can't or won't fall away with as much grace as you can manage, and cherish the ones who stay, who adapt, who love you through the transformation. Now let's talk about obstacles, because they will come. They're inevitable, and knowing that helps you prepare for them, helps you not be derailed when they show up. The first obstacle is often practical, logistical. You don't have the time or the money or the resources to pursue what you want. And sometimes that's genuinely true. Sometimes there are real practical constraints that have to be addressed before you can make big changes. But often, the practical obstacles are also excuses, ways to avoid facing the deeper fear, ways to tell yourself it's impossible so you don't have to try. So when you encounter practical obstacles, ask yourself, is this genuinely insurmountable, or is there a way around this if I'm creative and committed? Could I make more time by saying no to things that don't matter? Could I save money by cutting expenses that aren't essential? Could I acquire resources by asking for help, by learning, by being resourceful? Sometimes the answer is yes. There are ways around the practical obstacles. You just have to be willing to prioritize what you want, to make sacrifices in other areas, to get creative. And sometimes the answer is no, not right now. There are genuine constraints that need to be addressed first. And that's okay too. That doesn't mean you give up on what you want. It means you make a plan. You start working toward changing the constraints. You take small steps in the meantime, even as you work toward the bigger change. The second obstacle is often internal, psychological, emotional. The fear comes up, the doubt comes up, the guilt comes up, all the feelings we've talked about. And when those feelings get intense, they can stop you in your tracks. They can make you want to give up, to go back to the familiar, even though it doesn't fit. So you need strategies for working with those feelings, for not letting them control you. This might mean therapy. It might mean journaling. It might mean meditation, or talking to friends, or reading books, or whatever helps you process feelings and move through them instead of being stuck in them. The point is not to make the feelings go away. They won't. But to learn to feel them and keep moving anyway. To act despite the fear. To pursue what you want, even when you're scared or guilty or uncertain. The third obstacle is often other people's reactions, their opinions, their judgments, their attempts to keep you where you are. And this can be overt. People directly telling you you're making a mistake. Or it can be subtle. People withdrawing, getting cold, expressing concern in ways that are really about their own discomfort with you changing. And you have to be prepared for this. You have to know that it's coming. You have to decide in advance that you're going to keep moving forward even when people don't understand, even when they disapprove, even when they try to pull you back. This doesn't mean you don't listen to anyone's concerns. It doesn't mean you're closed to feedback. But it means you trust yourself more than you trust other people's opinions about what's right for you. You trust your own inner knowing more than you trust the external voices telling you to stay small. As you navigate all of this, as you take small steps and encounter obstacles and keep moving forward anyway, remember that this is your life. This is your one wild, precious life. And you get to decide how to live it. You get to decide what matters to you, what you want to pursue, who you want to become. Other people can have opinions, but ultimately, this is your choice, your path, your journey. And choosing to pursue what you actually want instead of what you think you should want. Choosing to become who you actually are instead of who you're supposed to be. That's not selfish. That's not irresponsible. That's honoring the life you've been given. That's being a good steward of your own existence. That's doing what you're here to do. Carl Jung believed that each person has a unique path, a unique calling, and that path can't be lived by anyone else. It can only be lived by you. And when you suppress your desires, when you live according to someone else's script, when you stay in a life that doesn't fit because it's safe or expected or easier than changing, you're not just hurting yourself. You're depriving the world of what only you can offer. You're leaving a gap that only you could fill. And that matters. That's important. That's bigger than just your personal happiness or fulfillment. When you become who you're meant to be, when you do what you're meant to do, when you live the life you're meant to live, you offer something to the world that no one else can offer. And the world needs that. Needs you. Needs the gifts and the perspective and the presence that can only come from you being fully yourself. So this isn't just about you wanting something different. This is about you honoring your calling, your purpose, your reason for being here. And that's sacred, that's important, that deserves to be taken seriously. Rest now, breathe. You're so close to the end of this journey we've been on tonight. Just one more piece, and then you can drift into deep, transformative sleep. You've learned so much, you've seen so much, you've given yourself permission, and you've started to see how you can move toward what you want. And that's everything. That's the shift from dreaming to doing, from longing to living, from the life you've been told to live, to the life that's actually yours. You're doing it, you're on your way. Trust that, Trust yourself. Trust that every small step matters. Every choice toward authenticity counts. Every moment of honoring what you actually want, instead of what you think you should want, is moving you closer to the life you're meant to live. Rest. You're exactly where you need to be, doing exactly what you need to do. We have just a little more to explore, and then you can rest completely, letting all of this integrate, letting it change you from the inside out, letting it guide you toward the life that's been calling to you all along. Now let's talk about what it actually looks like to start moving toward the life you want. Because permission is essential, but it's just the beginning. It's just opening the door. Actually walking through that door, actually taking steps toward what you want, that's where the real transformation happens. That's where your life starts to change, from the one you're living to the one you're longing for. And I want to be clear about something. This doesn't have to be dramatic. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. You don't have to quit your job tomorrow, or leave your relationship, or move across the country next week. That kind of dramatic sudden change, it can work for some people in some situations, but for most people most of the time, transformation happens gradually, through small, consistent choices, through incremental shifts, through what looks like nothing much from the outside, but feels like everything on the inside. So let's talk about how to start, how to take those first small steps when you're scared and uncertain and don't really know what you're doing. First, get clear on what you're actually moving toward. Not the whole vision necessarily, not every detail of that dream life, but the essence, the core, what matters most. Because if your vision is too vague or too complex, you won't know where to start. But if you can identify the essence, the thing that would make the biggest difference, the element that feels most essential, then you have somewhere to begin. Maybe the essence is freedom. Maybe what you really want underneath all the specifics is more freedom to make your own choices, to live on your own terms, to answer to yourself, instead of constantly accommodating others. Or maybe the essence is creativity. Maybe what you really want is to express yourself creatively, to make things, to use your imagination in your daily life, instead of just in your spare moments. Or maybe the essence is connection. Maybe what you really want is deeper, more authentic relationships where you can be fully yourself, where you're seen and known and valued for who you actually are. Or maybe the essence is meaning. Maybe what you really want is to do work that matters, to contribute something, to use your life in service of something bigger than yourself. Or maybe the essence is peace. Maybe what you really want is less chaos and overwhelm and constant doing, more quiet and spaciousness and room to breathe. Whatever it is for you, name it. Identify the essence of what you're longing for, because that essence can guide you even when you don't know the exact form it should take, even when the full vision seems impossible. Second, identify what's one small thing you could do today or this week that would move you even slightly toward that essence. Not a big thing, not a life-changing decision, just something small, something manageable, something that says, I'm taking this seriously, I'm honoring this desire. If the essence is freedom, maybe you say no to one commitment you don't actually want to do. If the essence is creativity, maybe you spend 30 minutes making something just for yourself. If the essence is connection, maybe you have one honest conversation with someone you care about. If the essence is meaning, maybe you volunteer for an hour or research organizations doing work you care about. If the essence is peace, maybe you protect 30 minutes of your day for quiet, for rest, for doing absolutely nothing. Just one small thing, something that honors the essence of what you want, something that moves you even incrementally toward it. And then do it, actually do it, not just think about it or plan to do it, but actually follow through. Because action, even small action, it creates momentum. It shows you that change is possible. It demonstrates to yourself that you're serious about this, that you're not just dreaming, you're actually moving. Third, notice how it feels when you take that small action. Do you feel more alive, more yourself, more aligned? Do you feel relief? Like, yes, this is right. This is what I've been needing. Pay attention to that feeling. Let it encourage you. Let it show you that you're moving in the right direction. And also, notice if it brings up fear or guilt or resistance, because it probably will. When you start honoring your desires, when you start moving toward what you actually want, the old patterns push back. The conditioning kicks in. The voices tell you you're being selfish or irresponsible or foolish. That's normal. That's expected. That doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. It means you're doing something new, something that threatens the old, comfortable, familiar patterns. So notice the resistance, acknowledge it, thank it for trying to protect you, and keep going anyway. Fourth, do it again. Take another small action, and another, not all at once, not in a frantic rush to transform everything immediately, but consistently, regularly. Making small choices that honor what you want, that move you toward the essence of that life you're longing for. Maybe it's once a day, maybe it's once a week, whatever feels sustainable for you. The point is consistency. The point is building a pattern of choosing what you actually want instead of what you think you should want, of honoring your truth instead of suppressing it, of moving toward alignment instead of staying stuck in the life that doesn't fit. And over time, these small actions accumulate. They build on each other. They create momentum. You start to feel more confident, more capable, more certain that this is possible, that you can actually do this. You start to see that the life you want isn't as far away as you thought, that you're already living parts of it, that you're already becoming the person you want to be. And sometimes, as you take these small steps, opportunities start to appear that weren't visible before. Doors open, people show up, circumstances shift in ways you couldn't have predicted or planned. Not because the universe is magically giving you what you want, but because you're paying attention differently. You're open to possibilities you would have dismissed before. You're willing to take risks you wouldn't have taken when you were still suppressing your desires. Fifth, be willing to adjust, to course correct, to change direction if what you're doing isn't working or isn't feeling right. Because the vision you have now, the life you think you want, it might not be exactly accurate. It might be pointing in the right direction, but the specifics might need to shift as you learn more about yourself, as you try things and see what actually fits. And that's okay. That's part of the process. You're not locked into your initial vision. You're allowed to change your mind, to realize that actually this isn't quite what I thought it would be. Let me try this other thing instead. Flexibility is important. Willingness to experiment and learn and adjust is important. You're not failing if the path curves. You're learning, you're discovering, you're finding your way. Now, let's talk about what happens in your relationships as you start pursuing what you actually want, because this is where a lot of people get stuck. This is where the fear becomes most intense. You're afraid that if you start living more authentically, if you start pursuing your own desires, if you start changing, the people in your life won't understand, won't support you, won't stay. And that's a real fear. It has some basis in reality. Some people might pull away when you change. Some people might not understand. Some people might prefer the version of you that was smaller and easier and more accommodating. But here's what you need to know. The people who truly love you, who truly see you, who truly want what's best for you, they'll adjust. They'll support you even if they don't fully understand. They'll choose relationship with the real you over comfort with the performing you. And yes, there might be some difficult conversations. Yes, there might be some adjustments. Yes, they might need time to get used to this new version of you that's more authentic and more herself. But if the relationship is real, if there's genuine love and connection underneath the roles and patterns, it can survive you changing. It can actually become stronger and deeper when you're being more real. The relationships you might lose are the ones that were based on you being a certain way, on you meeting certain needs, on you playing a certain role. And losing those relationships hurts. Absolutely. It's grief. It's loss, even when you know it's necessary. But what you gain is the possibility of real relationship where you don't have to perform, where you can be fully yourself, where you're loved for who you actually are, not who you're pretending to be. And that's worth it. That's worth the risk. That's worth the temporary pain of losing connections that weren't real anyway. So as you start pursuing what you want, be honest with the people in your life. Let them know you're changing, you're evolving, you're becoming more yourself. Give them the chance to come with you, to support you, to adjust. Some will, some won't. Let the ones who can't or won't fall away with as much grace as you can manage, and cherish the ones who stay, who adapt, who love you through the transformation. Now, let's talk about obstacles, because they will come. They're inevitable, and knowing that helps you prepare for them, helps you not be derailed when they show up. The first obstacle is often practical, logistical. You don't have the time or the money or the resources to pursue what you want, and sometimes that's genuinely true. Sometimes there are real practical constraints that have to be addressed before you can make big changes. But often, the practical obstacles are also excuses, ways to avoid facing the deeper fear, ways to tell yourself it's impossible so you don't have to try. So when you encounter practical obstacles, ask yourself, is this genuinely insurmountable, or is there a way around this if I'm creative and committed? Could I make more time by saying no to things that don't matter? Could I save money by cutting expenses that aren't essential? Could I acquire resources by asking for help, by learning, by being resourceful? Sometimes the answer is yes. There are ways around the practical obstacles. You just have to be willing to prioritize what you want, to make sacrifices in other areas, to get creative. And sometimes the answer is no, not right now. There are genuine constraints that need to be addressed first. And that's okay too. That doesn't mean you give up on what you want. It means you make a plan. You start working toward changing the constraints. You take small steps in the meantime, even as you work toward the bigger change. The second obstacle is often internal, psychological, emotional. The fear comes up, the doubt comes up, the guilt comes up, all the feelings we've talked about. And when those feelings get intense, they can stop you in your tracks. They can make you want to give up, to go back to the familiar, even though it doesn't fit. So you need strategies for working with those feelings, for not letting them control you. This might mean therapy, it might mean journaling, it might mean meditation, or talking to friends, or reading books, or whatever helps you process feelings and move through them instead of being stuck in them. The point is not to make the feelings go away. They won't. But to learn to feel them and keep moving anyway. To act despite the fear. To pursue what you want, even when you're scared or guilty or uncertain. The third obstacle is often other people's reactions, their opinions, their judgments, their attempts to keep you where you are. And this can be overt, people directly telling you you're making a mistake, or it can be subtle, people withdrawing, getting cold, expressing concern in ways that are really about their own discomfort with you changing. And you have to be prepared for this. You have to know that it's coming. You have to decide in advance that you're going to keep moving forward even when people don't understand, even when they disapprove, even when they try to pull you back. This doesn't mean you don't listen to anyone's concerns. It doesn't mean you're closed to feedback. But it means you trust yourself more than you trust other people's opinions about what's right for you. You trust your own inner knowing more than you trust the external voices telling you to stay small. As you navigate all of this, as you take small steps and encounter obstacles and keep moving forward anyway, remember that this is your life. This is your one wild, precious life. And you get to decide how to live it. You get to decide what matters to you, what you want to pursue, who you want to become. Other people can have opinions, but ultimately this is your choice, your path, your journey. And choosing to pursue what you actually want instead of what you think you should want, choosing to become who you actually are instead of who you're supposed to be, that's not selfish. That's not irresponsible. That's honoring the life you've been given. That's being a good steward of your own existence. That's doing what you're here to do. Carl Jung believed that each person has a unique path, a unique calling, and that path can't be lived by anyone else. It can only be lived by you. And when you suppress your desires, when you live according to someone else's script, when you stay in a life that doesn't fit because it's safe or expected or easier than changing, you're not just hurting yourself. You're depriving the world of what only you can offer. You're leaving a gap that only you could fill. And that matters, that's important, that's bigger than just your personal happiness or fulfillment. When you become who you're meant to be, when you do what you're meant to do, when you live the life you're meant to live, you offer something to the world that no one else can offer. And the world needs that, needs you, needs the gifts and the perspective and the presence that can only come from you being fully yourself. So, this isn't just about you wanting something different. This is about you honoring your calling, your purpose, your reason for being here. And that's sacred, that's important, that deserves to be taken seriously. Rest, now, breathe. You're so close to the end of this journey we've been on tonight. Just one more piece, and then you can drift into deep transformative sleep. You've learned so much, you've seen so much, you've given yourself permission, and you've started to see how you can move toward what you want. And that's everything. That's the shift from dreaming to doing, from longing to living, from the life you've been told to live to the life that's actually yours. You're doing it. You're on your way. Trust that. Trust yourself. Trust that every small step matters. Every choice toward authenticity counts. Every moment of honoring what you actually want, instead of what you think you should want, is moving you closer to the life you're meant to live. Rest. You're exactly where you need to be, doing exactly what you need to do. We have just a little more to explore, and then you can rest completely, letting all of this integrate, letting it change you from the inside out, letting it guide you toward the life that's been calling to you all along.